Takeaway number 10. We always do this. It's our college football playoff rankings look ahead. Some of the big questions we have going into the rankings release tomorrow night. All right. Number one, will Tennessee fall to the point in which their playoff hopes are potentially in jeopardy? All right. I'm really curious to see what the pecking order is going to be like between Alabama, Tennessee, and Georgia. They've all beaten each other. They've all won on their home fields. Bama lost to Tennessee in Neyland. Georgia lost to Bama in Bryant-Denny. And Tennessee lost to Georgia down there between the hedges. Now, Georgia has the best losses because they lost against Alabama and Ole Miss. Both currently reside in the top 10. And the committee this year, whether they should or shouldn't, they have acknowledged that who you lost to matters. Bama and Tennessee, they lost to teams that are just barely above 500 in Arkansas and Vandy. Tennessee lost at Arkansas. Bama lost at 6-4 Vandy. So you can almost add Ole Miss to this list, but they have the worst losses of the bunch. They lost to Kentucky at home, and they lost to a now 6-4 LSU that appears to be heading in the wrong direction. Now, right now, there's also, let's throw in the possibility of Texas winning this week at at Kentucky, Texas A&M losing at Auburn, and then Texas A&M beating Texas in a couple weeks. Then there is a real possibility that the SEC has 6 teams that are all 10-2. In the event in which A&M wins this week and then beats Texas, they're 10-2, but they're in the SEC championship game in that scenario. So the SEC is about to be crazy, and there's going to be a really good SEC team with just 2 losses this year, maybe 2 that are left out of the college football playoff. And people are going to be losing their minds. I'm just telling you, I told you this a couple weeks ago, there are not enough spots to go around. We thought 10-2. Yep, you go 10-2, you'll be in. Not anymore, man. Not in this season. So I wonder what they're going to be valuing. One other thing I'm curious about. Notre Dame, they're in good shape to make the playoff. Right? We know that. That's not up for debate. I thought their win this past weekend, a convincing win against Virginia, it only further solidified their standings. I think Virginia's a solid team. I wouldn't say they're great. They're a solid team. They made quick work of them in the first half of that football game, and their offense continues to get better. But I'm most interested in where is Notre Dame and how likely are they to be hosting a college football playoff game in the first round? We know they can't get a first round bye. We know that. So the best they can do is hosting. And we know that teams that are playing in conference championships, even if they lost, they might be ahead of Notre Dame just because they had to play that 13th game. I'm not saying they will be. I'm not saying they should be. I'm just saying they might be. So if you're Notre Dame and you want to host, you need to be up ahead of as many teams as possible going in to the final week of the College Football Playoff Committee rankings. The other thing I'm curious about, how far will BYU fall? BYU last week up to number 6. How far down do they fall? And I think it's likely at this point, but I think it's likely that Boise is ahead of BYU and Colorado, meaning that Boise is really well positioned to get a first round bye. And the Big 12, their champion, would probably get a home playoff game, but they might not even get that. The Big 12 champion could very well have to go on the road in the first round of the college football playoff. So that's something worth noting. And then finally, Indiana. There's been a lot of discussion about Indiana. I, for one, very much. So here's my evaluation of Indiana. I watch Indiana, and I am remarkably impressed with their level of execution on offense and defense. They do a great job. They're really well coached. I think they have a lot better players than people realize. I think they have some perimeter matchups on the outside with their wide receivers that can be a real problem against some teams. But I also acknowledge that this Indiana team has yet to really see a defense that is of championship caliber. And I saw Joel Klatt comparing Indiana's strength of schedule, which currently is 106th, against Georgia's from last year. Georgia on November 18th of 2023 was 77th. So the gap, not that significant, right? 29 spots between Georgia at 77 last year and Indiana currently at 106. But here's what's stupid about that argument is that last year there was a 14 playoff and strength of schedule really didn't factor in anywhere near as much as conference championships did. Because in a 14 playoff, you basically had to win your conference to have a chance to get to the college football playoff. And there were examples in the 10-team history of the 14 playoff in which teams that didn't win their conference got in. But most of the time, the reason why the team that didn't win their conference got in, it's because other conferences screwed it up. Like there was a 2-loss champion in the Big 12 or a 3-loss champion in the Pac-12 or whatever it may be. So I look at where things are right now, and now that we've evolved to the 12-team playoff, we have to acknowledge that strength of schedule is going to factor in more this year. Because last year, Georgia, them being the 77th ranked strength of schedule didn't matter because we all knew that if they beat Bama, they were going to get in. Like the path was clear. Yes, the SEC East wasn't great. Yes, it was down. And yes, Georgia's schedule last year was extremely manageable, but they still had to beat Bama in the SEC championship game. If they do that, they're in. So we're not looking at Georgia and thinking, all right, yeah, that's 77th strength of schedule, and they didn't have to play in the SEC championship. Yeah, like we should put them in. No, not at all. Like you now this year with the 12-team playoff and with more flexibility and with more opportunity to evaluate different data points, we need to focus on team schedule more so this year than we ever have before. Look, I never expected a bipartisan debate with Joel. I'm not going to have it. I understand that. 3 weeks ago, he had Michigan as a college football playoff contender. So I always take his playoff opinions with a slight grain of salt. But I would hope he'd understand the difference in the data points that we need to consider in 2023 versus 2024. Schedules, playoff format, all these other things. Like it's totally different year. So using last year's basis is not applicable to this year's basis. And strength of schedule didn't matter. Like it was going to resolve itself. It was going to completely resolve itself. And Indiana plays a Big Ten schedule, but their Big Ten schedule is not comparable to that of a Big Ten schedule that some of other Big Ten teams have had to play. They're sitting at 106, all right? They are just behind Hawaii and just ahead of South Alabama. There is not a single other Power 5 school whose strength of schedule is below 93. So what Indiana's done up to this point is play a G5 schedule, which is fine because Indiana now sitting this week right in front of them is an opportunity to show the world that our strength of schedule doesn't matter. This week, you go out, you play well. I don't care if you win. I don't care if you lose. If you just play close, if you're competitive, nobody, and I mean nobody, will be able to make a strength of schedule argument against Indiana. You go out and win, you're cooking with gas. You control your own destiny. You go out and lose, fine. As long as you look competitive, people will still come out of that game respecting Indiana. But if you lose badly and you get rocked by, say, 3+ touchdowns, then we might need to start deciding, all right, well, is Indiana really that good? Or are they the product of having played a much weaker schedule than some of the other teams in the Big Ten? It's going to be fascinating. Massive game this weekend. We will preview it on Thursday's edition of Always College Football. For all of us here at ACF, we encourage all of you to like, rate, subscribe to the show. Always appreciate how you guys have supported the show. I've told your friends about the show. And I always appreciate you guys saying, man, hope your voice feels better. I'm going to be fine, guys. Don't sweat it. It's only a voice. We'll be fine. All right, for all of us here at Always College Football,